Hello, everyone. How are we? Thanks for joining us this evening, morning, night, wherever it is, whenever you are. Sorry for the delay and being late, everybody. I'm about an hour late. I was having some terrible Wi-Fi issues, but we're here now, and I'm glad that you're all able to join us. So this evening or morning or whatever it is for you, we're going to be discussing the Northern Bank robbery that happened in Belfast uh, in December of 2004. And this is the largest cash robbery that ever happened in British or Irish history. And it's a robbery that had geopolitical and economic consequences that happened after it. Something that isn't really typical of cash robberies for it to have a political impact, but we'll get into why that is. But thank you everyone for being here, and Amber, thank you very much for being here. I'm glad you were encouraging people to hit like, and I'm sorry everyone for starting later, but we're here now, and we've managed to beat the gremlins and get past all the internet issues. So I'm very glad about that. So let's get into it. So a background. The Northern Bank is now called the Danske Bank, and it is a bank in Belfast, and it was the main bank is the main bank of Northern Ireland. And Northern Ireland is the British-controlled part of Ireland. So it's six counties of Ireland's 32 are under British control, and Belfast is the capital of this arrangement. So most of the business and money in the north of Ireland goes through Belfast, goes through the Northern Bank or the Danske Bank, as what it's called now. So this is a major hub of money, of economic trade, of all kinds of things to do with money. So it was holding a lot of money as well. Uh, so on the 19th of December 2004, both bank managers could only stay for a few minutes but hadn't heard of this one, so we'll replay what I missed. Great, thanks. Glad you could join us, Neat. And yeah, stay as long as you can, and there's no pressure. I'm glad you could make it. And thank you very much for being here. So we're talking about the Northern Bank. So this isn't a very well-known robbery, and I think in true crime that people tend to only really cover murders, but there's more to crime than just murder. You know what I mean? There's robberies, there's heists, and no one was harmed in the process. So there's people were brutalized and threatened and scared, but no one was physically harmed. So on the night of the 19th of December 2004, the two main bank managers, well, they weren't managers, the two key card holders, the two men who were able to get into the vault at that point, because what would happen in the bank is there would be two key holders, so two people who could get into the vault, and that would rotate week by week. And it just so happened that this week, the guys who were in charge of the key cards was Kevin Mullen and Paul and Kevin Mullen and Chris Ward. These are two guys, and they were both the guys who were the only ones who were able to get into the vault. So the robbers knew this and had inside information somehow that those guys were the ones who were the key card holders at that point. So on the night of the 19th of December 2004, initially the robbers went to Chris Ward's house and basically said, hello Chris, I'm here to talk to you about Celtic. And Celtic is a Scottish football team that a lot of people in Ireland support because it was founded by Irish immigrants to Scotland. So a lot of Irish people and Scottish people support Celtic Soccer Club. And Chris Ward was known in the area as being the guy who ran the local Celtic supporters club and would often have tickets for games and arrange for tickets for games for people. So for a guy to be coming to his house where he was there with his parents, a guy coming knocking on his door in the evening asking about Celtic game tickets wasn't that unusual. And then as he let the guy in, another guy stepped into the picture, basically interview of the door, and he was dressed as a police officer, and then they put a gun to the family's heads, Kevin and the whole family, and said, "Right, Kevin, we're not here to talk to you about Celtic, really. We're here to talk to you about your job at the bank." And then they explained the situation and said, This is a tiger kidnapping. We're going to hold your family hostage, uh, and you're going to stay with us through the night, and then in the morning you're going to go into work, you're going to go into the vault, and you're going to have business as usual, and you're going to get as much money as you can out of that thing, and then you're going to load it up, um, and then take it to the back, take it to the bullion bay, and then we will come along in a truck, in a van, and you will give it to us disguised, and we will take it. And this is what was done. And the same thing was done to Chris's boss, Kevin Mullen. Chris's incident happened in Belfast, whereas Kevin Mullen's happened in Lough Island, which is outside, a little bit outside of Belfast. And a similar situation happened at Kevin Mullen's house, where it was him and his wife, and they came in and took over the house, and basically held Kevin Mullen's wife hostage and told him the same that they told Chris Ward. You're going to be robbing the bank for us if you want to see your family live again. So basically, the robbers were saying, if you don't, we'll be watching you. If you don't do a good enough job, we're going to kill your family and we're going to kill your wife. So that's the threat that they were making, and that's what the situation was. So Chris and Kevin were brought together, and they were basically told the situation, what was expected of them, and also the robbers stressed how much personal information they knew about the men, and explained how easy it would be for them to, use violence against their family and their spouses. And you think about it from your own point of view. If you're working at a bank and someone's comes into your house off hours and says, "Look, if you don't rob the place for us, if you don't steal as much money as you can for us, and get it out there without anybody noticing, your whole family is going to die. We're going to kill your whole family." I think most people would do it. These guys. Chris Ward said in an interview that, like, yes, we had panic buttons working in the bank in our homes. Yes, we're told we should, like, always go to the police in these situations. But what are the police going to do? Are they going to be Are they going to be Superman and punch in the window and run into the room and disarm all the robbers and save my family? No. He was thinking of hostage crisis situations going through his head. So there wasn't even a moment where they were going to either of them were going to try and fuck around. Chris Ward said he had uh, thoughts about reporting it and raising the alarm, but realized like if this gets tense, they could kill my family and then just fuck off and run away, and they're not even caught anyway. So what's the point? So I think like also the professionalism of them, the fact that they were able to gain entry under false pretenses to these guys' houses, and also were able to. They were also the robbers were also heavily armed with pistols, with and also had police uniforms. It just, I think, stressed to them how professional these guys were, and also the fact that the robbers clearly knew inside information that they would have to have obtained through somebody inside of the bank, i.e., the fact that they knew it was Kevin and Chris who were the key card holders for that very week. And also, it says a lot that they were doing it they were planning it, or they executed the kidnappings and the takeover of the houses of these two men on the 19th of December, but made them do the robbery on the 20th. And that's important because the 20th of December that year was basically the last work day before the Christmas break. So this actually helped the men because Kevin, being the supervisor, was able to say to all of his other employees, look, guys, it's Christmas. We can finish work early, and you guys can go and you can shop in Belfast city centre for late gifts for your friends and your families. And me and Chris will stay here and we'll finish up. And that gave them cover to have all the other people in the office away, so they could go down to the Bullion Bay, load up these trolleys, and they had trolleys down there that they'd use to transport money. And then they'd fill the trolleys with money wrapped inside and put a trash bag over it, to kind of disguise all the money in there. And then they'd make believe to the security guards, oh look, we're just taking trash down from the office outside, and it's going to be collected by truck and taken away. And then it was the robbers who were coming by with their van who were picking up the money, and it was a couple million at a time. That's how much they were getting from the robbery, and in total altogether it was about 26.5 million that these guys got, all without even walking into the bank themselves. This just shows you how professional this kind of operation was. You don't often hear of tiger kidnappings, which is the official term for them, in the United States or in other countries. However, they're very popular in Ireland. They've been popular in Ireland for a very long time. And basically, it utilizes the fact that the weakest part of a bank's security is its staff. You can plug holes in kind of security, in the general sense, to where they can make it as difficult as possible for a guy who's just running in there with a gun to actually get into the vault, which it is very difficult for someone just doing that now to do. So with that in mind, I think that the robbers were very clever in the fact that they were like, right, okay, it's too hot and too difficult to be able to just run in there and try and convince the staff that whoever's the key holder should open it up and all that shit. And in that time, they may have hit a panic button, and you're already looking at the cops already being on their way. That's crazy. I am aware of a similar string of bank robberies done the same way in the US. Yeah, I would love to hear about that, Nate, because I haven't really heard about a tiger kidnapping done in anywhere really outside of Ireland. I'm sure they happen, but I've not come across a case of. I'm sure they happen in like Africa as well. You know, like Nigeria. You know, those places have all kinds of robberies and scams going on. So it wouldn't surprise me if such things have been done in countries like that. You know, where there is a higher level of lawlessness in certain areas. Um, but yeah, I'd love to hear about that, about the other cases, and especially ones that happened in America. But they were in the bank. They were loading up the trolleys with cash, a couple million at a time. And on the first run, the van came along. They were there. They were dressed. The guys were dressed in like boiler suits and had their faces like obscured. And then the guys loaded the cash onto the van, and then the guys in the van drove off very quickly. And then this routine was repeated for the next hour or so at various intervals, so that it wouldn't raise too much of suspicion. And a person actually saw this transfer of the money to the van and vice versa, all with it looking like it was trash that was being loaded onto the van. However, this person still felt the situation was suspicious enough to warrant a call to the PSNI, which is the Police Service of Northern Ireland, to say, look, there's something fishy going on here near the Northern Bank. You might want to come and check it out. And then the PSNI sent two police officers who were on the beat, walking around Belfast, over to the bank to check it out. But by the time those guys had got there on foot, the police had got there on foot. It was the last run of the robbers, and they basically cleaned the place out as best as they could. 26.5 million. That's an insane amount of money. And during the whole time, uh, Chris and Kevin's family were being held hostage. So Kevin's Mullen's wife was being held in a separate place, and Chris Ward's family, Chris Ward's girlfriend, mother and father and brother, were being held in one house, and Kevin Mullen's wife was being held in another separate location. So there were. This was a large robbery. Okay, so the people involved in this, it's not like 5 or even 10. It's probably about 20 people involved on the ground, maybe even 30, in executing this robbery. So, like 30 odd people are involved in this. And the men were always masked in balaclavas, who were, holding and guarding the Ward family and Kevin Mullen's wife. And they were also forensically very, very much aware. They were forensically cleaning the house. Most of them were wearing boiler suits and surgical gloves, and they, even despite that, they did a full forensic clean of the house before and after leaving. uh, Cigarette butts, they kept their own. They didn't leave them in an ashtray or anything like that. Anything that could leave DNA or evidence. These people were professionals. They weren't chancers. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they were very much aware of forensics. Which, now you ask, 1 second, I'm just going to get some water. And I'm back, thank you. Yeah, but the professional nature of the robbery, and how forensically aware the robbers were, and how many of them would have to have been involved in the robbery. Immediately, when obviously it was announced, and the families had been released, because once the robbery had been complete, the Kevin Ward's wife was driven out of the house with a bag on her head, taken into the woods where she thought she was going to be shot. And all she could keep saying was, "Please don't bury me out here. If you're going to kill me, please just tell my family where my body is. Don't just like just leave me here, you know what I mean? Just tell my family where I am at least." And then the man who was with her said, "Look, just lay down here, don't say anything for 5 minutes, and then leave." And then she listened to him. She was waiting for a gunshot as he left, but there wasn't one. And then she heard a loud bang, and she could tell that that was the car that brought her to the woods, to the forest, being set alight. Because, in her words, that's what people do here. Because she's living in Ireland, and that this is just after the conflict. So after like the IRA would do a shooting, or one of the other paramilitaries would do a shooting, obviously they'd have a getaway car, and then they burn the car with petrol, and it would blow up. So she was very much familiar with the sound of a car blowing up, engines blowing after being burned. Hi, Amber. Glad you could join us. Yeah, late start for me, sadly. I had gremlins and Wi-Fi issues and all sorts of stuff. And even in my intro, I was having issues. The damn intro song that I like to play wouldn't even play. So we're having to you're having to all bear with me for this evening. But I've found that sometimes when things go wrong and there's difficulties in the live beforehand, actually afterwards, the live actually comes out to be a better live. You know, I've always found that in my experience, the where I'm struggling before that adversity actually in the long run helps me. Glad you're still here, Neat. Yeah, so Amber, we're talking about the Northern Bank robbery. So this is a bank robbery that was done through tiger kidnapping. And you might not know what tiger kidnapping is. It's not literally kidnapping a tiger. It's where in a bank robbery, you find like the key holders of the vault, or like senior bank people who would have access to the vault. You don't run in the bank and rob the place. You rob their home. You go into their home, and then you hold their families hostage, and then you say to them, "Look, if you don't go in tomorrow, act business as normal, act casual, and then rob the vault and give us all this money, then we're gonna kill your family." And this is what happened, and that was done in Ireland in December 2004. And uh, basically, Chris Ward and Kevin Mullen, who were the bank managers, well, no, Kevin Mullen was the bank manager. Chris Ward was a junior to him at Northern Bank, which is the biggest bank in Northern Ireland. Uh, and obviously, Belfast, business capital of Northern Ireland, so a lot of money in there. Uh, they were tasked with, you know, going into their own place of work after being you know, after their homes been taken over, after their families been taken hostage by these people, and threatened like they will die if you don't fucking do this. You know, so I can't imagine the level of stress that these guys were under. It's incredible that they were able to pull it off as well. And obviously, with I said earlier, Amber, with Kevin being the manager, he was able to send everybody home early because it was near Christmas, and then him and Kevin Ward, the other key holder, were able to load up trolleys and then cover them with garbage bags of money, and then the robbers would arrive, or a team from them would arrive in a van at the back of the bank, and then the guys Kevin and Chris would load up what they said was garbage to the security, but was actually millions of pounds wrapped together, covered with garbage bags, and then altogether they got £26.5 million. So that's the largest cash robbery in UK or Irish history, and that was in 2004, and it's not been topped since. So it's a really professional robbery. And the fact that both of their homes were taken over, their families were held hostage, Amber, like, I'm thinking minimum 20 people involved in this job, maybe even 30 or 40 on the ground, that is, not even just planning it. And obviously, we're going to get into that, but the only group that could have done that was the Provisional IRA. And the Provisional IRA were at the time and still are on ceasefire. So this is a moment in Irish history where the IRA had said, we're going to try peace now and we're going to engage in politics and not war. And the IRA's political representatives were basically trying to, get into government in Northern Ireland at the time, and were in talks to begin power sharing with the unionists, with the people who want to keep Northern Ireland part of the UK. So this is what's going on in the background. And then you have this robbery going on during a really tense moment in the peace talks between the Catholics and the Protestants, to simplify it for you all, because it's more complex than that, but that's just to simplify it. Peace talks between nationalists and unionists, basically, uh, were going badly. There was much tension. And then this robbery only inflamed those tensions even more, because there was no organized criminal gang in Northern Ireland that could have pulled that off. That no one has those kinds of numbers or expertise to actually do something like that. It has to be. It was executed with army precision, and the Provisional IRA is an army, sees itself as an army, acts as an army. May not be considered an army by a lot of people, but nonetheless, its members see themselves as being part of an army, the Irish Republican Army, and therefore there's a chain of command there. And Chris and Kevin both noted that amongst the robbers, and when they were being held hostage, there was a clear chain of command. It was clear that there were people giving orders amongst the men, and there were people receiving orders. And also comments that were made by the men saying that the Northern Bank was a shower of orange bastards. And orange bastards means that, like, Protestants, basically. Because you see on the Irish flag, it's like green, white, and orange. The green's for like the Catholic nationalists, the orange is for the Protestants, and the white's for like everybody else. you know. But that's what he meant by that. He's saying like it's full of prods. It's a wash of orange bastards. Don't worry about robbing it. They're a bunch of bastards anyway. So those kinds of comments, like, lend credence to the theories that, like, this was done by the IRA. And also the head of police in Northern Ireland, Hugh Ord, said that our lines of inquiry point to the Provisional IRA and nobody else. So, for want of a better, for want of, to put it bluntly, should I say, the IRA did it, and it's the largest cash robbery ever. And Chris and Kevin's family obviously were freed after the robbery was complete. And I told you earlier about Kevin Mullen's wife thinking she was going to be shot in the woods, but obviously she wasn't. They blew up their own car that they used to drive her there, and then they ran off. The robbers, who were sent to hold her, she managed to get out of the forest and found her way to someone's home, and then told them, and then they raised the alarm to the police. And then Chris Ward basically was able to do the same thing, the same with his family as well. They were all released and freed without harm. But obviously, it must have been very terrifying for them. Like, one minute they're watching television, together, and then the next there's people in their house with guns, putting guns in their faces, and terrorizing them, all for money, you know what I mean? And like, these guys weren't, like, massively paid wealthy bankers. These were just guys who worked at the bank. They weren't wealthy people. They were just ordinary guys with families, and then in the process, their families got, terrorized, and stuff like that. And it's really, it must have been really frightening for them. But the main line of inquiry was the IRA, and there's many reasons as to why the IRA would do that. My personal view, given that it was done in 2004, was that it was done, I think, to be used as not all as a pension fund, but mainly as a pension fund for ex-IRA members of IRA veterans, because obviously the IRA being an illegal army, uh, in most places, and not a conventional army. Its members were volunteers, technically speaking. Like, they would be referred to as IRA volunteers. So, like, it's not like you're getting paid a wage if you join the IRA. You're a volunteer. However, I think that they wanted to do that for people who may not be able to find work again, because they might be injured either physically or psychologically because of the war, and then that money can be used to give them a pension, and also it could be used to bribe people who may not be so kumbaya and on board with the peace process that was going on, and may have wanted to go back to war. That money could be used to say to hardliners, look, don't go back to war, don't go to violence. Take this nice few quid, take this money, go and open a bar for us in Jamaica, go and open a bar for us in New York, and you give us a little bit of the profits, and then you keep some of the profits, and everybody's happy, and that's a nice retirement plan. You don't need to go and carry on the war. You can go and have a nice life in the sunshine. And I genuinely think that that's what this was all for. I don't think the money was being used to buy guns or anything like that for some kind of coup. If the peace failed, I genuinely think it was as a pension fund for their members, and a bribery fund as well for people, like I said, who were not so on board with the whole peace thing. And the man who, I can say this now because he's dead and he won't try and sue me, the man who I think masterminded the whole thing is a man by the name of Bobby Story, who was at that time the head of IRA intelligence. And he was a prominent commander from the Belfast area and very well respected guy within the movement. He was the one who masterminded the whole plan. And he was arrested and questioned in relation to the whole robbery, but he was let go. And of the 26.5 million, very small amount was recovered. Cash money in a banker's, Liam Cunningham's, I think that's his name, Liam Cunningham, a banker in Cork, who the IRA were using to clean money. So obviously they would have had laundering processes and people, bent financial people, corrupt financial people, bankers and the sorts, who will be able to show money, whereas IRA people would not be able to show money, especially from a robbery. So there were these types of people who were able to get the money that the IRA got from the robbery and then change it and clean it to make it look legit. And this was done obviously by some of the best people financially in Ireland who were in on it with them. So they had no issues cleaning the money. However, 3 months after the robbery, the Northern Bank reissued its notes. So basically, all the money that was taken was not legal tender anymore. It had to be exchanged for the new notes. However, this is the IRA we're talking about here. These guys are professionals. They're not going to just do a robbery of 26.5 million, sit on it for 3 months, and not have means and people to clean it, to change it, to get it out of there and make it look legit. They absolutely did. The overwhelming majority of that money has been cleaned and has been invested into pubs, restaurants, nightclubs, everything. Hey Val, glad you could join us. Hi Jay, at dinner but wanted to stop by. Hey ATS News, Neat Noodle. Good to see everyone. Hope you're all having a good night. Oh yeah, glad you could join us, Val. And no worries, I'm so glad to see you. And it's great that you're here. What's for dinner? And send my love to all your babies. Glad you could make it. We're talking about the Northern Bank robbery, so I certainly suggest checking out any parts that you missed, Val, because this really is an interesting one. And thanks so much for asking people to hit the like. That's so kind of you. And yeah, if you guys could, that would mean a lot because I think it's a cool to push out different kinds of true crime. Because it gets kind of depressing after all the murder and all the stuff like that. So robbery is part of true crime. So I think on my channel, I'm going to start, as well as doing missing people's cases and murders, I want to start pushing the robberies, and the organized crime and white collar crime and the stories of that kind of, because this is true crime still. It's just a different kind of true crime. And I think that it still has a place, I think, to talk about. And I think this story in particular is really interesting because I think that very few robberies have an impact geopolitically, and this did. And because the IRA were the ones that everybody thought did it, it put a lot of pressure on the IRA's political representatives to make more concessions in the peace talks. So the year after this, so this happened in December 2004. Then in July 2005, the IRA announced that it was over, that the war was over, and that it was going to be putting all of its weapons beyond use, so decommissioning all the guns and taking the guns out of Irish politics. That this robbery, I think, sped up that process exponentially. I think without this bank robbery, the IRA might not have decommissioned and disbanded. And well, while the IRA's structures still exist, it doesn't exist as an army or as a group as it used to anymore. And I think that this robbery was a part of that. And you're looking at £26.5 million that was taken. That's a crazy amount of money. And this is taken by people who are professionals, who have discipline, you know what I mean? None of that money was snorted away, you know what I mean, was blown on drugs or anything stupid like that. It was all invested in businesses, and the IRA have, a huge property empire based on the back of this robbery and other robberies, but mainly this. So construction firms, nightclubs, bars, restaurants, farms, all kinds of things, car dealerships, all kinds of businesses and money making opportunities were bought with this money. And obviously, the IRA would have people, figureheads, guys, to say, look, you on paper are running this, but you're paying us a large amount of the money that you're making, and we give you a small cut, but still a cut that makes it, nice enough for the person to want to do it. It's oftentimes minimal work, maximum reward with these types of things. But I can't imagine how awful it must have been for the people's families who were held hostage. And Val, if you're still here, this bank robbery wasn't done by the IRA running into the bank and with their guns pointed at the teller. This was done by intelligence. This was done sneakily and smartly. They with gaining inside information, we're still unsure as to how they got this. They figured out who the key holders were for the vault, and then they found out where these guys were living, came into the houses, took over the place, pointed guns at their families and them, and said, "Look, if you guys don't go into work tomorrow, and absolutely raid the hell out of the vault, put as much money out of it as you can, and give it to us. We'll kill your family and you." And this is guys with guns. These are guys who are really well disciplined and trained, and you're not going to fuck with them. No one is going to fuck with them. You're going to do what they say. And thankfully they did, for everybody's safety, because if any one of them who'd have tried to raise the alarm, it could have been an absolute bloodbath of a situation. As I'm pretty sure those guys were not going to be taken alive. This situation was crazy. Glad you could make it, Christine. Yeah, we're talking about the Northern Bank robbery that was done through a method called tiger kidnapping, where instead of running into the bank, the robbers identify the weak points in its security, which is the people. And with inside info, you can find out who the key card holders are for the vault. So if you know who they are and you can control them, you've got access to the vault, my friend. So these guys, the key holders, their homes were raided by armed men and their families were held hostage, and they were told, "Look, if you don't go to work tomorrow and you don't act business as usual, but manage to get as much money as you can out of that vault for us and then deliver it to our guys who are going to be coming round back to pick it up in a van, um, your whole family is going to be killed." So these guys had absolutely no choice. Um, and they managed to rob where they worked for 26.5 million under duress of their families being held hostage. And this was the biggest cash robbery in British and Irish history. And there's not been a cash robbery that's even compared to it since. This happened in 2004, December 2004. So that's kind of a background to it. But unlike other bank robberies, this wasn't done by an organized crime gang. This was done by a group of people who consider themselves to be an army. This was done by the Irish Republican Army. And as I was saying earlier, the IRA were a guerrilla group that was fighting to get the British out of Northern Ireland. And at this point, the IRA's guns were silent and it was talking peace, and its political representatives were trying to uh, build a government, a shared government in Northern Ireland with their political opponents, and build a peaceful future. And all the while this was going on, the IRA carried out the biggest bank robbery in British and Irish history. And I was saying earlier, Christina and Val, that the reason I think that these guys did this robbery was for a pension fund for their members, because the IRA is an illegal group, and it's not like they can have on paper a pension fund for their members and things like that. And also, it's who was the IRA fighting? The IRA were fighting against the British Army. The IRA wanted to get the British out of Northern Ireland because basically 26 counties of Ireland are free and part of the Irish Republic. However, 6 of them are still under British control. And the IRA's purpose was to get Britain out of those 6 counties and to make Ireland an all Ireland republic, a 32 county republic without any kind of foreign influence. So that was the IRA's aim. And basically, it had stopped doing that, fighting at that point. However, it didn't stop it from doing other activities. And the British were willing to turn a blind eye to a lot of IRA activities after they said they were on ceasefire, for the sake of the peace process. So they were willing to turn a blind eye on small robberies of places, in order to keep the peace. However, this is something that they couldn't ignore. This was 26.5 million pounds. You can't just brush that off. And they were named as being the guys who carried this out because there's no one else who could have done it, Christine. There's no one else at that time in Ireland could have had the ability to pull it off, because they kidnapped two different guys. They held two different guys' families hostage. They had a different team of guys coming to collect the money. They had so many guys working on this thing. It must have been like 20 to 30 guys, different teams on the ground that day, probably even up to maybe even up to 50. Okay. And I don't know an organized crime group that can pull in that many people, and can pull it in without anyone ratting. You know what I mean? You've got to. It's different than any kind of other crime. You know what I mean, or any other group of criminals. This is people who really have discipline and know what they're doing. You know, this is a really professional job. And glad you're still with us, Amber. I'd like to hear what you guys think. Like, Amber, Val, if you're still here, Christine, if you were bank managers working in a bank and uh, guys came into your house and said, look, if you don't go into work tomorrow and rob the place for us, we're going to hurt you and your family. Like, would you do it, or would you try and raise the alarm and risk it? I know for me, I'd do it without a second's thought. Money means absolutely nothing to me versus the life of my family, you know what I mean, and my loved ones. So I'd do it without a second's thought. And I just like to hear what you guys think, though. That would be interesting. I think, and both of these guys, Chris Ward and Kevin Mullen, said in interviews, it's like, what do you think? The police are just going to, smash through the windows like Superman and knock out all the bad guys and disarm them, and everybody's safe and everybody gets to walk home? No, that isn't how things like that happen, in the real world. So, but yeah, I'd love to see or hear, like, Christine and Amber, what you guys would do in that situation. Would you do the robbery, or would you go to the authorities? It's really interesting. But sadly, once they were investigating this, Chris Ward was accused of being in on it, which I don't believe. The Provos, the provisional IRA, or the IRA, had Provos as a nickname for them, because their official name is the provisional IRA. There's many different IRAs, but this particular one is the provisional IRA. That's why I call them the Provos, and most people do, to distinguish them from other IRA groups. Provos were the most successful IRA. And basically, Chris Ward was accused of being in on it and giving the robbers the inside information and arranging his own kidnapping and things like that. But he was later cleared of all that, and I don't believe that. I believe that the IRA probably had someone working there for a few years before they did it. I think that it wasn't something that was planned uh, a year before it happened, or 2 years. I think it was planned a good 4 to 5 years maybe before it actually happened. And this is like the level of planning and detail that went along with this. This was as professional a job as I've ever seen in a robbery that I've investigated. I've investigated many different heists, and very rarely do you get the sense of a perfect job. But I think this is as close to a perfect job as a robber would want to or could get. And I just think it's a shame that these people's had to be terrorized for money, and the people's lives were put at risk all for something as pointless as money. I think it's really sad, and I totally condemn it. You know what I mean? I think that you shouldn't do that. It's like people like talk shit on banks, and I get it. Bankers are mostly bastards who are overpaid and greedy. But these guys, like I said earlier, they weren't bankers. They were guys who worked at the bank. They weren't like they weren't like scammers or shylarkers. Um, they weren't con men. They weren't overpaid. They weren't rich. You know what I mean? They weren't that well off themselves. So and their families suffered a lot of trauma, and they suffered a lot of trauma, and because of the fact that Chris was from a Catholic background, the police did accuse him and feel he was suspicious, and that he may have passed these guys info and been sympathetic to him, and that's terrible for Chris. The fact that you know, his life was on the line, and his family and everyone went through all that, and now he's got to deal with being, under suspicion. It just because of his background is it's absolutely awful. You know what I mean? And this just shows you the whole cruelty of this whole case. And they made a few arrests, like I said, for people who had relatively small amounts of money related to the robbery. And they were only able to recover a very, very small percentage of it. I'm talking less than 1 million. So there's like 25.5 million out there, and we don't know where it is or where. And that's that's the situation. As I said earlier, it's been cleaned and put into various different businesses, and it was a very, very successful robbery. And I have to give credit where credit's due. Um, it was incredibly well planned. However, there were moments where it was very close for them all. Where as they were loading the money onto the van from the bank, which they'd managed to get out by basically covering it in a trash bag and putting it on a lorry, not on a lorry, on a trolley, and taping it together so that they could fit more in. And that's how they were getting it past the CCTV cameras without it looking like suspicious. And they were just saying that they were moving trash and broken furniture to the back of the bank, and then it was getting collected by vans, trash guys, and it was taken to recycling. Like, that's what they were telling the security staff. Security staff completely bought it. You know what I mean? And there was no kind of sense that something was amiss. And as I said earlier, this is for the people that weren't here then. They were able to do this because Kevin was the manager, and it was the 20th of December, so he was able to say to all the other employees, right, everybody, you can go home early, or go and do a bit of early Christmas shopping, and see you after Christmas. And that gave them the ability to get all this done as quickly as they could. And then by the end of the night, the bank had been empty for 26.5 million. And it's crazy. But whilst I think on the second run, the time that the van came back for a second time, somebody spotted them and saw that one of the guys who was, you know, collecting what looked like trash but was actually money, was wearing a wig and like to disguise his identity. And the person who walked past obviously felt that that was a bit odd, and then called the police and said like something weird going on near Northern Bank. But by the time the police on the beat, like walking, had actually turned up, it was just after the last run had ended. So they turned up just as the van disappeared for the last time. So they were close, the police, at catching him mid act, but it was no cigar. And anyway, by that point, most of the money had been moved anyway. So even if they did get that one little team, none of those guys were going to break. None of those guys were going to say anything. You know what I mean? But I am glad that it turned out in the way it did and that no one was hurt. But at the end of the day, it must have been really traumatic for the families of these guys, and for these guys, it's crazy. But yeah, I was just wondering, like, everybody watching, like, what would you do in that situation? Like, if you work at a bank and then the guys turn up at your home with guns and say, "Look, we're gonna kill your family if you don't do this." Like, what choice have you got? You know what I mean? Like, yeah, you might have a panic button, but do you want to, like, put your family through a potential hostage situation? Like, I don't think so. I wouldn't want to. I know I'd do it, because screw the bank and screw their money at the end of the day. Uh, Human life will always matter more and be more valuable than a bit of paper at the end of the day. And that's how I see it. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys think, and how you would look at the situation. And I'm glad that you all could make it as well, as especially when I was an hour late because of all the internet issues. And I'm glad that you could all bear with us. Yeah, I'm going to be ending it pretty soon, because I've basically gotten out most of what I wanted to say. But what you guys should look out for is there's going to be a movie released on Netflix about this robbery very soon. So you guys can, watch the movie about it, uh, already knowing obviously the whole background to it. And never have I studied a robbery that had this level of geopolitical consequences. Like, the fact that if it wasn't for the pressure that came on the IRA after this robbery, I don't think that they would have gotten rid of their weapons and embraced peace as quickly as they did. And so, in a way, it worked out for the better of Ireland that this happened. And also, with the money that they got from it, as I was saying earlier, as well as being used as a pension fund, it was used to bribe guys who were probably not too keen on the idea of peace to, to give peace a chance, so to speak. Basically, like, they'll basically say, "No, no, I'm never going to give up. The war goes on." And then they say, "Right, here's £1 million. Do you feel any different?" And then they would say, "I do, I think I could give this peace thing a chance." So basically, that's what I think happened, and ultimately, I think it meant that there's less war in Ireland. So good, it was good. But I'm sorry, and I feel regretful that, uh, and I wish it never had to have happened, or did happen, because it put Kevin Ward and it put Chris Ward and Kevin Mullen and their families through so much horror. Like, I couldn't imagine, like, 1 second you're watching TV with your family, and the next there's guys in your house with guns, and they're saying, like, "Look, you're gonna go and rob your place of work, otherwise your whole life is over and everyone you love is gone." It's like, it's terrifying. I can't imagine that. Like, I can't imagine being able to feel safe in my own home after that. After it's been, taken over by people. I would sadly be like, this isn't like a home anymore. It would be, like, I guess, tainted in my eyes. It wouldn't be a safe place to get away from it all. And yeah, so there's a lot of things I think it's in no way had to happen. But I think that what it led to further along the line, i.e., the IRA, committing to peace and the gun being taken out of Irish politics, I think was a good thing. Uh, but I wish no one had to suffer as a result of it. But yeah, thank you everyone for being here tonight, and I'm going to start wrapping it up. if unless there's any questions that anyone has or any points that anyone would like to bring up, please do. I'd love to hear it. You're all been great with your interactions tonight, and I'm just really happy that you could all make it short notice, and with me being late because of the internet issues and everything. But yeah, and any kind of comment, question, anything, I'd love to hear it. But if not, I'll start the outro. No, well, I guess that's all we have time for tonight, or today, or whatever. But it's a little bit of a short one. But I really enjoyed talking about it, and thank you, Christine and Amber and Val and Neat and everybody else who's been watching. Yeah, it's been an interesting one. I think I'm going to start doing more of this, where it's true crime, but it's not murder. You know what I mean? I'll be doing like robberies, talk about robberies and art heists and like this kind of thing, because I think that there's a real gap in the market for that type of stuff. Like we all love true crime, and we love advocating for victims and for families and following the cases. But I think it can, if especially the ones with kids, it can get like depressing. So it's nice to cover cases where obviously it wasn't nice for the families of these people, and for these people, these bank managers and employees, to have guns waved in their faces, and threats made to their lives and their families' lives, but no one was harmed. So it's like easier to talk about, I think, and easier to enjoy hearing about than like a murder or anything like that. I think it's and it's also interesting for people, I think, who like problem solving and puzzle solving as well, like, because it is a big thing to be able to get away with 26.5 million. You've got to have a high IQ planner, you know what I mean? And I think that people who are very interested in planning and security, and how these things are executed would get off to the kind of info that I'm sharing. Like, oh, I like that. The Isabel Stewart Museum is a great one. Oh, I'll have to absolutely look into that. I think that sounds really interesting. I'd love to do that. So like anything like bank robberies, art heists, museum heists, jewelry heists, um, anything like that, high end robberies. Uh, will be a type of live that I'm going to be doing a lot more of in future. And I'm going to try, and I know I always talk about trying to get people on, but I'm going to start doing that now. I'm gonna I have money that I'm going to invest in on guests, so I'm going to start paying some guests to come on, because I know, like, I'm very grateful for the people who come on for free, like Amber and Cher and everybody else. But I know, like, for people uh, who are in very high demand, obviously money helps to get them on the show, and hopefully with me wanting to do that, I might be able to get on someone who is an ex robber, bank robber, or cop who investigates bank robberies. You know what I mean? Like, I want to hear from people who investigated or did these kinds of crimes. Like, I want to know about all the planning, all the variables in planning, and everything like that. And and I'm sure, and I feel like you guys would enjoy that too. It's a change from the ordinary true crime. It is, I think, more interesting. I think it's just as interesting as murder cases, but like I said earlier, it's a nice balance. You know what I mean? It's something that it isn't blood and guts 24/7. It's something a little different, a little thrilling. You know what I mean? But yeah, thank you everyone for being here, and I will be live again. I think Thursday or Friday, and remains to be seen what the live will be on. But I'm thinking maybe just a general true crime update. So I'll talk about any of the little updates in the Nancy Guthrie case, D4VD David, and all the other ones that are going on at the moment. Just a general true crime update type of thing, and might get some people on to chat and stuff, depending on who's around. And over on the weekend, you've got Amber's streams to look out for and watch, and I might appear on there if she'll have me. So yeah, you might see me there as well. So keep an eye out. And thank you, everyone. Really, really, I really mean it. It means a lot this evening as well, especially because we started late. We had technical issues. You know, you guys really hang in there for me and always show up, and that means the world to me. You know, it really does. So thank you, everyone, for showing up this evening. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Bye.